In RT4-2, you are going to use the law of cosines. So you all know that in a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But now, the ancient Greeks were wondering what happens if it's not a right triangle, and they did some investigating, and they learned that in an acute triangle, c squared is actually less than a squared plus b squared, and in an obtuse triangle, c squared is actually greater than a squared plus b squared. So then they were curious, what could they find that would make it work in all three types of triangles? And as they were looking, they figured out that it was c squared was equal to a squared plus b squared minus something, sometimes. And other times, c squared equals a squared plus b squared plus something. They figured out that that something was actually 2 times ab times the cosine of c. And what they did is they generalized this for every triangle. And they figured out the law of cosines. And that is a trigonometric property that we will be using for all triangles. So let's take a look at this property, the law of cosines. So the law of sines says for any triangle with sides ABC and angles ABC, of course the side A has to be opposite of angle A, and so on. What the Pythagorean theorem, or what the law of cosines says, this should be a little c because it's the side c. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2 times a times b times the cosine of angle c. Let's go ahead and practice. I'm going to start by writing out the law of cosines. C squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab times the cosine of angle C. Okay. Now, in this problem, it says to find x. As I'm looking, I see here is x, so that's my side length, and directly across from that, I see my angle measure of 36. What I know from that is this has to be angle C, and this has to be side C. So when I go to substitute, I'm going to put x in for my C, and for angle C, so cosine, my angle is going to be 36. My other two, 52 is a side length, 45 is a side length. I can pick either one of those to be A, either one to be B. So let's just call 45A and 52B. So 45 squared plus 52 squared minus 2 times 45 times 52. Now we can put all of this into our calculator, and you get x squared equals, so type that whole thing in, 45 squared plus 52 squared minus 2 times 45 times 52 times the cosine of 36, and you get 942.8004663, and your calculator rounds there. Now, it's going to be really, really important that you leave this number in your calculator. Don't round it yet. We want to wait till the very end to round. At this point, we are going to square root both sides to get x. Now, in your calculator, you want to do the square root. If you're using a graphing calculator, you can hit second and answer. So do the square root and then second to get to answer, and that's on the negative button. And it'll put in that entire number, or you can just type that whole number in. You do not want to round it until the very end. So we get 30.70505604. Now it's okay to round. X is approximately 30.7 centimeters. So let's remember, do not round until the end. Again, we are asked to find x. This is this side length. And we have to remember to start with our formula. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2 times a times b times the cosine of c. What this means is that x is C, 82 is directly across from it, so that's our angle C. 23 could be A or B, we'll just call it A. 28 could be A or B, we'll just call it B. I'm going to go ahead and substitute our information. So we don't know C, so that's x squared equals 23 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times A, which is 23, times B, which is 28, times the cosine of angle C, which is 82. Go ahead and put this in your calculator. 23 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times 23 times 28 times the cosine of 82. And I get 1,133.745046. Your calculator rounds. We are not going to round to the very, very end. So leave this number in your calculator. When you go to take the square root of both sides, you get x equals. In your calculator, you're going to do square root. You're going to then hit second, and then the minus or the negative button. That's going to give you the answer. So if you hit second, negative, it's going to give you the answer, and it's going to take the square root of your answer from before. Or you could go ahead and type in 1,133.745046 because you want to get the most exact answer. So x is going to equal 33.67113075, and we're going to round to the nearest tenth. X equals just about 33.7 centimeters. In this problem, it asks to find the measure of angle Q, which is right here. 45 is opposite of that angle. What this means with using our law of cosines, 45 has to be C. We're trying to find our angle, so our angle Q is going to be C when we think about the law of cosines. 51 and 42, either one can be A, either one can be B. We're going to start with our formula. C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2 times A times B times the cosine of C. Let's substitute what we know. 45 is our C, so 45 squared equals A is 51, so 51 squared plus B squared, which is 42 squared, minus 2 times 51 times 42 times the cosine of C. We don't know that angle, so we'll leave it as the cosine of C. In this problem, we are going to need to do it step by step. We cannot just put everything in our calculator once because we're looking for that angle measure. So 45 squared is 2,025. 51 squared is 2,601. Plus 42 squared, which is 1,764. Minus, now you can do 2 times 51 times 42, which is 4,284 times the cosine of C. And I'm going to actually change that because it's really Q here. C is Q. Now, let's pause for a second. A lot of you probably look at this and want to put all of this into your calculator. And in this case, you cannot. You cannot put this all in your calculator right now because we don't know what Q is. What we are going to put into our calculator right now is this part. So 2,601 plus 1,764, we get 4,365. I'm going to bring everything else down. We are just solving an equation at this point. We want to get the cosine of Q all by itself. So what we're going to have to do is move the 4,365 by subtracting that number on both sides. So 2,025 minus 4,365 gives me negative 2,340, which is equal to negative 4,284 cosine of Q. Now you might be saying, Ms. Gutierrez, why is that negative? Remember, subtracting is the same thing as adding the opposite, so it's really plus a negative 4,284. Now, to get cosine of Q all by itself, we just need to divide both sides by negative 4,284. Notice our negatives go away, and you get 0.5462 and so on equals cosine of Q. Make sure you keep this number in your calculator so we can have the most exact number. To get Q all by itself, we have to multiply both sides by the inverse of cosine. So I'm going to hit second cosine to get the inverse, and then I'm going to hit second negative to get the answer. Or you can type out the entire number that you saw in your calculator. And we get 56.9 when we round it to the nearest tenth equals Q. So remember that cosine inverse and cosine cancel, which is why we're left with just Q. This is an angle, so it should be with degrees. In this one, we're trying to find the measure of angle T. So again, we're looking at an angle measure. Here is angle T. And opposite, we have 51, so we have that opposite side, which means that T is going to have to be our angle C. That's what we're looking for. And 51 has to be side length C. So let's remember our formula. C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2AB cosine of angle C. 70 and 62 are our other side lengths, so we'll just call them A and B. It doesn't matter which one is which. And we're ready to substitute what we know. So C squared is 51 squared equals A squared, which is 70 squared, plus B squared, which is 62 squared, minus 2 times A, which is 70, times B, which is 62, times the cosine of our angle, which is T. Again, when you're solving for the angle, you cannot just plug everything in like we did with the first couple examples, 1 and 2. We have to do this one step at a time. So 51 squared is 2,601. 70 squared is 4,900 plus 62 squared, which is 3,844 minus, I can do 2 times 70 times 62 all at once. This is just multiplication, which is 8,680 times cosine of T. At this point, we can combine these two numbers because those two are like terms. They are not like the other term over here because that one has cosine of T. So those are very different. We're going to add 4,900 plus 3,844 to get 8,744. I'm going to bring everything else down. I cannot combine my 8,744 with the minus 8,680 cosine of T because cosine of T is our variable. Okay, so we cannot combine those. If you're having a hard time imagining what we did in the last problem, at this point, what this is similar to would be 2,601 equals 8,744 minus 8,680 times our variable x. Okay, and you could probably tell me, oh, we need to get x out by itself, so we're going to subtract 8,744 on both sides. We're going to do that same thing here, but we're using cosine of T. So here I'm going to subtract 8,744 on both sides. So 2,601 minus 8,744. I get negative 6,143 equals negative 8,680 cosine of T To get cosine of t all by itself, I have to divide both sides by negative 8,680. Leave this number in your calculator. 0.7077, your calculator 18894. Leave it all in your calculator. We're going to get the most exact answer. On the other side, we have cosine of t. To get t all by itself, we have to undo cosine. To undo that, we're using the inverse of cosine. We're going to do that to both sides. So you're going to do second cosine to get cosine inverse, and you're going to put that answer back in, 0.707718894, to get the most exact answer. When we do that, we get 44.950 and so on. Cosine inverse and cosine cancel, and we're left with t. Now if we're going to round this to the nearest tenth, the 9, we look back at the 5. The 5 tells us to round up. 9 rounds up to 10, so we actually get 45 degrees for angle T. Make sure that you have gone back through these. Make sure you've taken good notes. These are great examples to look back at as you are solving your practice problems.